Welcome everybody. My name is Tim Burris and today I want to go over 10 tips for using Visual Studio every day. Number 1 is go to all. So if you're not familiar with go to all, Control comma will activate the go to all, and in here you can find just about anything. In this current project, company is one of the entities. So if I start typing company, I would expect to find company model there, company repository. Just press enter and go to it. If I was looking for the company business model, I would go company model, and you can see it all showing up here on in the list. You can find just about anything in here. Method names, for example, I know that there's some functionality for generating PDFs. So generate PDF. If I can spell PDF, there it is. There's a function for generating PDFs. Anything you can think of. Let's say you're looking for Nemo. I think you can find Nemo. So here we go. There he is. So you can find Nemo. Anything you want to find, use go to all. Shortcut key is Control comma. Number 2 on my list will be moving things using moving things using Alt up down. So if you're on this line and you press the Alt key and the up and down arrows, then you can just move this line of code wherever you want to go. So you can just move it up. But more than just moving a single line with Alt up down, you can move chunks of code. So if I take all of these properties, looks like 4, I can move all of them down. So you might want to move this region, just move the whole thing up to the top. So Alt and then the alternate key and up and down arrows will move either single individual lines if nothing is highlighted, or just the blocks that are highlighted. Number 3 on my list will be copy paste entire lines. While we can use our Alt up and down to move these blocks of code, you can also, of course, just copy and paste them. But what I see most of the developers do are they'll select this entire line, hit Control C, and they'll come down and they'll paste it here. And while this works, and then you highlight the whole line, hit Control X to copy it, and then move it up here. And that definitely works. But there's actually an easier way in Visual Studio is if you don't select anything, so if your cursor is just on the line with nothing selected, when you hit Control C, it will copy that entire line. So if I just Control C here and then Control V here, it'll copy and paste that line to right there. Same thing for cut. So if I'm on this line, if I just press Control X, it's just going to cut that line and then paste it. So while you can use in the previous tip, your Alt up and down to move things, if you actually want to delete a line, let's say you're not going to do name anymore, I usually just use cut and just let it, I use that as my delete. But you don't have to select your entire line to copy it. Just Control C, Control V. Number 4 on my list is duplicating a line. So while we can do Control C and Control V, that works great, we can actually make that a little bit simpler by simply pressing Control D as in delta. So if I press Control D, delta, then I will just duplicate this line over and over. But it works better than just, well, it also works on entire blocks of code. So let's say that we have this command here, submit, and now we also want a delete command. So we can highlight the entire block, we can hit Control D, and this will duplicate the entire block. The reason this is better than a simple Control C, Control V is we hit Control D to duplicate and our entire block stayed highlighted. So immediately after Control D, we can hit Control H to do a replace, and we can replace submit with delete in the selection. And now we've made our submit command a delete, and of course we just need to come through and fix everything up. But the power of Control D for duplicate is very simple for single lines, but also for entire blocks, you will remain highlighted. Number 5 on my list is column select. Now column select is a bit of a doozy, I guess. It's gonna take a few examples to kind of demonstrate the power of it, and it's one of these tips that until you get comfortable with it, it can be a bit cumbersome. But once you get comfortable with it and you're using it every day, you will find immense power in it. So let's talk about what column select is. I'm going to go to let me just open that company model again. And we'll go in here. So What column select is it's the ability to hold Alt Shift and press the down arrow and select these columns. And then once we do that, we can do things like hold the Shift key and go over and select all of these. Or if we hold Control and use the right arrow, then we can just move by blocks of word. Well, on the surface, you're like, well, who cares about that? But there's a lot of places that you can make use of this. So let's say that that we have these I guess 8 properties, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, these properties, and we just want to copy all these property names. Maybe we need to paste them in the notepad or what. So I'll start over. We'll alt shift down 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 down. We'll hold control to the right, and now we'll hold control shift to the right, and we will have selected all of those property names. We'll hit control C, and then we'll switch over to our notepad real quick. And now we can just paste those property names in there. Of course, with only 7 properties, that's not that huge of a deal, but you can imagine if there were 30 property names that you wanted to extract out of there, then that would be quite a bit more powerful. Other uses, let's say that we've copied these properties, these entire properties, over into our view model, and we're gonna need basically the same properties, but on the view model we want them all to be string. Again, we can just we'll go over, we'll highlight just the data types, and then we will type the word string space, and now we've replaced all those data types with a string. Of course, the errors here are because these properties already exist. Now you don't have to use the keyboard, you can actually use the mouse, so you can hold Alt Shift and come down here and click here, and you will have selected all of those. We could Control X and cut all of those. We could then Control Shift left, and then we could backspace to delete all of those. So you get to make bulk changes to multiple lines of code using this column select. But editing these properties is not usually where I probably find the most value, but it was a good place to demonstrate. I'll show you a few more examples that are probably more practical for how I use it. Let's say, we have this view model here, and we have these properties, name, notes, current, trash, and we're just assigning them to this rec. But let's say we refactor these properties, and now they are going to exist on a child class. Let's say we create a new class called input model. I'm just going to create it right here. And we are going to let's just move all these guys into this input model, and then we'll create a property called input model, and we'll just call this input. Great. So now all of these are broken because I've moved them. There's only 4, so this isn't a huge deal, but again, using our column selection, we can highlight down to here, we can control right over to here, and now we can just type in our new our new property, because now all of these are under the input property. And so we type input dot, and now everyone is happy. So imagine if this is 20 properties or whatever. I think you can start to see some of the value in how you might use column select. But I'll do one more example that demonstrates column select. I am going to I have this database. I'm going to go and find a lookup table. Let's see if we can find a good lookup table in our database here. Okay, here we go. Line item unit type. So we're just going to look at the data in here. And what we want to do is we want to create an enum with these names and these IDs, because these are static. They can't be changed in theory. So what we want to do in C# is we want to create an enum that would say per milk jug is value 1, other is value 2, so on and so forth. So we can use column selection in Visual Studio. I'm going to first copy these. Well, let me move this guy out the way. I'm going to copy these 5 values, and then I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio, and we're going to start authoring an enum. We'll just put it right here in code, right here in this class. So we'll do public enum. I forget what that was, but I think it was unit type ID. So we'll start our enum, then we'll go ahead and paste in those values. But of course, the format for enum is a bit different than this. We can take this, we can use Alt-Shift down, select these guys, Control-Shift to the right. We'll cut all 5 of these integer values because that's what we need. We'll use Shift and the right arrow to highlight the comma. We'll delete that guy. We'll press the end key, END, end key to go to the end. We'll type equals. We'll paste in the value. You see it because of the column select, it had 1 through 5. And then we'll add a comma to the end. And then we're mostly done. We could either choose underscores or just to get rid of the spaces. I prefer to just get rid of the spaces, so I'm just going to say replace space with nothing. Good. And the only other thing that I would like to do here probably is I'd like to see these uppercase on the first character. So again, I'll use column select. I'll do Alt Shift down, down, down. Alt Shift to the right one to highlight all of these. And now one of the shortcuts in Visual Studio is Control Shift U, Control Shift U to make whatever you have highlighted in uppercase. So again, once you get the hang of that, creating an enum from that data, you can do it in just a few seconds, and you don't have any typos, which is something that I'm always trying to improve on because a lot of typos for me. So that way I can copy and paste from the database, I can format these enums and be done with it pretty quickly. There's probably a dozen other ways that I could think of using the column selection, but I think that's enough to illustrate the point. So we will move on to number 6. And number 6 is the ability to use control dot IntelliSense, or I'm sorry, control dot suggestion to create a new file from a class. And why is that useful? This is what I encounter a lot. So I have this validation result, and it's perfect. I don't know how anyone could ever come up with a better version of this, but let's imagine that that there's some refactoring needed. Let's say that we no longer need errors as a string, but we now need a model for this. We need some kind of class. It's going to be more than just a list of strings. Errors are going to have some other set of properties. So I would come into this model and I would say, okay, I am going to need to figure out what exactly is that going to look like. So I would go ahead and start my class right here just so that I can have it all together. And I would say, all right, so this is going to be my validation result error. I don't know. We'll call it that, and then we would create a few properties like the error, and I don't know. Let's just create a notes. Okay, so we've created that, and we are going to say that that this guy is now going to be a list of validation result errors. And we would probably want to do the same thing for warnings, so I'll Control D to replace that, warning, and this probably should have been message instead of error, but okay. So now I've created these 2 additional classes, and I like to create them here because I might need to flesh this out a little bit, trying to figure out exactly what properties should be, how they should be. Should this be a list? Should it be a dictionary? So on and so forth. I get it all figured out. Now here's where the shortcut comes in. I've created them in here. I can press Control dot, and one of the options on the in Visual Studio here is that you can just say move type to this. This will create a new file, a new class for this model. So I can hit that. And boom, it create that, and then I can just do the same thing right here and move type. So this lets you easily just create your new classes right here where you're kind of thinking about it, and then you don't have to go through all the clicks where you come over here and you do right click, add class, type in its new name. Like you wait on this to come up and you're like, okay, so this is vendor result error. You don't have to do all that. Just type out your class here in your existing editor, and then Control dot to bring up the move to, and then you can just move it to another, create a file right there. Super easy. Number 7 on my list is also the use of Control dot, but instead of creating the file, we are going to rename the file. And it's probably best if I just show what I mean. So we're gonna pretend like we did not create the warnings just yet. So I'm gonna get rid of this guy, and we've created the error. Everything was great. Now we've decided, oh, warning should be similar, and it's going to be almost identical. So what we can do is we'll just come over to our Solution Explorer. We'll hit Control C, Control V. That's going to create a copy. We'll open this guy up, and we are just going to go ahead and rename him to say warning. And this is a pretty simple change, but now we need to change the file name as well. And if it's a complete change and it's more than just typing the word warning on the end, you have to type it all. You copy and paste, but instead you can just do Control Dot, and then it's going to give you the option to rename the file as warning. So what was a copy before now is validation result warning. So with things like this, you can easily just make a clone of your files over here, fix the name, Control Dot, and then rename the file instead of renaming it here and then copying it, Control Shift L to go to Solution Explorer, F2 to rename, Control V to paste. It's not that hard, but using the rename file is pretty handy when you're making copies of classes. Number 8 on my list is going to be replace all in open documents. So on the surface, this is a pretty simple feature of Visual Studio. So you can do Control Shift H to bring up the replace, and one of the options is you can replace all in open documents. And oftentimes, well, for over a decade, I found this to be almost useless, and I wondered why. But as time has gone by, I found more and more use for it. So I'm going to demonstrate how I use this find and replace in all open documents pretty regularly. In this project, I have an entity called payment. So this is an MVC project, kind of traditional MVC before Razor Pages, no Blazor. So I have views for my payment. I have models for my payment. That kind of back each of those views, and as you might expect, I should have a controller for payment somewhere in here. Okay, so often what I encounter on a project like this is I have something else that looks a lot like payment that needs to work very close to payment, and so I want to clone kind of all this payment UI functionality and then give it a new name. So we'll start by just doing we're going to highlight it here in Solution Explorer. We'll do Control C, Control V, and that will create a copy of payment right here. I'm going to go ahead and open up each one of these guys so that they're all open. I don't have any other documents open. So I've done the views. Now I'm going to come to my models. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Control C, Control V. Creates a copy. I'm going to open each one of these guys. Last but not least, I'm going to go to my payment controller, and I'm going to do Control C, Control V. So now I have a copy of my payment controller, and I open that. So now the only documents I have open are these copies, and the reason that's important is now I can do a find and replace on payment in all the open documents with whatever this new similar entity is. So I'm going to hit Control Shift H, bring up my find and replace. We're going to find payment. And I'm not sure what this new entity is. We are going to say it's widget. And we will start by replacing payment with widget. We'll do match case because we're going to have variables that maybe start with a lowercase, things like that. So this is not going to be exact, but this is a good starting point. We'll do find and replace payment with widget instead of in the entire solution, we'll do all open documents, and then we'll run that. We'll get a bunch of replacements. Then we'll come here and we'll change this to be our lowercase p and our lowercase w so that we can get all those others. Okay, perfect. Now what we can do is we'll just do save all, and we can start closing out these windows and renaming the files as we go. So we'll hit Control Dot. This is actually one of the previous tips, so we'll rename this file. Alrighty, and we'll hit Control F4 to close that. We'll do the same thing here, Control Dot. We'll say rename the file. Control F4 to close that. And we will just keep moving right along, renaming these files, closing them. Oh, and then we'll hit Control F5 instead. We'll build the project. It's not going to build. Everything's going to be unhappy. And I'm not going to edit it out. I'm going to let you suffer through what I have to suffer through when you press the wrong key. Alrighty, so yeah, we renamed it. Just need to Control F4 to close that one. That was where I messed up. Was a Control dot here, rename, and you know, I don't need to finish all these out, but I guess the reason I kind of wanted to continue forward actually was, it's not perfect. When you get to your views, there is no rename because those, they don't have a class that matches them exactly. So you're going to have to go back old school and just highlight it. Control Shift L, Control Alt L to bring up your Solution Explorer. F2, to rename, and you have to do that for each one of those, and of course you have to rename your folder to be widget. So it's not going to do everything for you, of course, but you will get maybe 90% of all your find and replace. Then you still need to go through, tweak this to be exactly what you need it to be for widget. But if you've been doing software development for a while, I have a feeling you have run across more than once the need to clone an entire kind of feature set and make it similar for another entity. Now, number 9 on my list is Control KD. That's Kilo Delta. Control KD is to format the document and apply, spacing. So let's imagine that that we are typing this out and we're doing if, we're adding some. So true, let's say true equals false, and we're doing this, and we're going to do a return here, and we've typed it all out like this. And what a lot of times I see everyone doing is going in and fixing the carriage return, like, oh, this should be on the next line, and this. But Visual Studio has a format document that'll do all this for you. So if you hit Control K, and while you're still holding the Control key, hit D. So Control Kilo Delta, and it'll format for you. And so I'll constantly press Control KD while I'm typing out documents, just so I can get my indentation, spacing, and wrapping, all that stuff taken care of while I'm typing it. But let me put this back to being not perfect. There's also a way that you can tell it that anytime you save the document, you want it to automatically apply the formatting. So even though I'm always pressing Control KD, not always, but I'm often pressing Control KD while I'm typing to format, I also like, whenever I save the document, to have it go ahead and apply the formatting as well. So when I hit Control S, like I did there, it'll format. And the way that you tell Visual Studio that you want to apply the format whenever you save a document is using code cleanup. So if we go to Tools, and then we don't go to Tools, we go to Analyze, Code Cleanup, and let's go ahead and hit Configure Code Cleanup, and we'll see these come out of the box. There's a change to this, but it comes with 2 profiles. This one, it does remove unnecessary imports and using. I've only just started using these. I typically have not been a fan of doing these, but it seems like most people do. So I'm trying to maybe be more consistent with what I see a lot of my colleagues doing. But format document is the one in here that's important. That's the one that we were just talking about. So you could remove these other guys and just have format doc. You configure this code cleanup, but it actually isn't being used yet. So this is profile 1. Format document is in here. Once you've set this profile, this code cleanup, this code cleanup to be the way you want, then you're going to need to go to your tools, options. You're going to need to find your text editor, and then under text editor, you're going to go to your code cleanup, and then you're going to check this box, run code cleanup profile on save, and then you're going to choose which profile you want to run. So I chose profile 1, and profile 1 is the one that has the format document. So if you want to auto format your document on save, if you want to execute the Control KD on save, set up your code cleanup profile, and then make sure Visual Studio is set to execute that on save. And last but definitely not least is using vertical document groups. So in this MVC application, we have our HTML page here, and we have our view model here, and it's super, super common that I want to have them side by side. So I will create a new vertical document group. Now, typically I'm running on a larger monitor, so you can read this a little bit better. I'm going to go ahead and just unpin this so we can see. But it's very valuable to have these documents side by side. There's a couple of ways you could do that. I just right-clicked and chose it. You can drag these guys and drop it, but if you're a keyboard person like I am, I prefer to set up some key maps for these. And the way I use these key maps are, let me open up a model again. I have a key map for Control Tilde. So when I hit Control Tilde, it'll create a new document group and move that guy over there. Unfortunately, the way Visual Studio works is they have new vertical group, and so if I hit Control Tilde again, it's going to create another vertical group. So it's going to keep creating them. So you have to have, unfortunately, a few different key maps to make this work. So I have 3 key maps. Control Tilde creates a new document group. Control Shift Tilde will move whatever document to the left. So if I'm in this delete right here and I hold Control Shift Tilde, it's going to move it back to the left document group. Control Tilde moves it to the right document group, and then the third key binding I remember whenever I'm here and I hit Control Tilde, it makes a new group. Well, that's kind of a pain. So the third binding is when I have this and I want this document to move into this group over here, Control Shift Tilde tells it to move into the next document group beside it. So 3 bindings. One of them is create a new group. One of them is move into the group beside it. And the other one is move to the previous group. So next and previous. And the way you map those out, you go to the key map. And I'll just show you what they're called here. I'm going to come down and just so that you can see what they are, I'm going to hit Control Tilde just so you can see. New vertical tab group is what I use for Control Tilde. That will move it to the right, creating a new group. I also use Control Alt Tilde, which is move it to the next tab group. That's if I already have that tab group and I want to move it over there along with it. And then the other one that I use is Control Shift Tilde, and that one is to move it to the previous. So that would move it from the right side to the left side. And you can see that what those commands are right here. So if you want to map yours up, and maybe those key combinations are terrible for you and you want something better, obviously find your keys. But being able to, from the keyboard, easily move these guys to the groups I want them to be in, back and forth, maybe get rid of all of them, is super valuable for me as I'm switching between usually my presentation and the model behind it. And that's it. Those are my 10 tips for Visual Studio with .NET, and I use all of those probably every day. There might be a few of them that maybe not every day am I creating an entire copy of a feature set, but in general, I'm using almost all of those every single day. For a lot of you guys who are more seasoned, you probably already knew all of those, but maybe at least one of them was something you hadn't seen before or hadn't thought of before. So hopefully it helped you out. As always, appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day.